Hello and welcome to her revenge arc. My name is Alara and tonight I invite you to listen, not to a tale of fiction, but to a chapter of my own life, transcribed from memory into the story you are about to hear. The world I once knew was quiet, fragrant and built on trust. It was a world of subtlety, of essences and whispers. And then, a different kind of world, one of bright lights, loud voices and curated realities collided with mine. Tried to shatter it. This is the story of that collision. It is a story about how a reputation, meticulously built over years, can be tarnished in moments by a voice louder than your own. But it is also a story about finding your own voice, in your own time, and on your own terms. It's about the quiet, unyielding power of the truth. So find a comfortable place, dim the lights if you wish, and let me tell you how it all began. My world, for the longest time, did not exist on a screen. It existed in the amber glow of my small studio, in the cool, smooth touch of glass vials, and in the symphony of scents that told stories far older than I was. I am a perfumer, not the kind you find in a glossy department store, representing a global brand with the celebrity face. I am, or was, something of an anachronism, a bespoke perfumer. My craft was the art of olfaction, the translation of memory, emotion and identity into a tangible, wearable essence. My studio, Ori, was tucked away on a cobblestone side street, a place you wouldn't find unless you were looking for it, or perhaps if you were meant to. The air inside was a living thing, a complex tapestry woven from thousands of threads. The deep, resinous hum of frankincense, the sharp, green promise of galbanum, the sweet, melancholy sigh of aged vanilla absolute, the earthy dampness of oak moss, and the powdery, sophisticated caress of orris root. The walls were lined with dark wood shelves, holding not books, but hundreds of small, amber and cobalt blue bottles, each meticulously labeled in my own looping script. They were my palette, my orchestra. My work was slow and deliberate. A client would come to me not for a product but for a process. They would sit in one of the two worn velvet armchairs by the window, and we would talk, sometimes for hours. They wouldn't tell me they wanted to smell like roses or sandalwood. They would tell me about their grandmother's garden after a summer rain, about the scent of an old library book from their university days, about the faint, salty tang of the sea on their lover's skin. My job was to listen not just to their words, but to the spaces between them, to the emotions that flickered in their eyes. I was a translator of the intangible. I would then retreat to my organ, a tiered semicircular desk where all my essential oils, absolutes, and tinctures were arranged by family and volatility. The process of creation was a meditation. It was a dance of drops and measurements, of patience and intuition. A top note of bergamot for a flash of joy. A heart of jasmine sambac for a current of deep love. A base of vetiver for a foundation of unwavering strength. Each formulation was a hypothesis, a question posed to the air. I kept meticulous records in heavy leather-bound ledgers. Every drop was recorded, every trial, every failure, every modification. These books were my life's work, filled with the chemical poetry of human experience. My clients were not influencers or celebrities. They were architects, poets, retired professors, quiet lovers. They cherished privacy and appreciated substance over style. My business grew through whispers, through a friend telling a friend, "You must meet Alara. She doesn't just make perfume. She captures souls in a bottle." I was content. My life was small, but it was deep. I had no desire for fame, no need for the validation of strangers. My validation came from the tear that would well in a client's eye when they first smelled their bespoke scent and said, "That's it. That's me. How did you know?" I had, of course, a modest online presence. An Instagram account with perhaps 2,000 followers, where I would post aesthetically pleasing, but impersonal photos of my ingredients. A close-up of a vanilla bean, a pile of sandalwood chips, the delicate petals of a damask rose. My captions were simple, often just the botanical name and a brief note on its olfactory profile. I had a simple website with my contact information and a philosophical statement about my craft. It was a digital business card, nothing more. I engaged very little. The digital world felt loud, ephemeral, and ultimately hollow compared to the tangible, enduring reality of my studio. It was a tool, not a world to be lived in. I was profoundly naive about its power, both for good and for ill. I had no idea that a predator, one who thrived in that bright hollow world, was about to wander into my quiet, fragrant sanctuary. Her name was Serafina Vance, but to her millions of followers, she was simply Sarah. Her brand, Sarah's Gilded Life, was a masterclass in aspirational content. Every photo was perfectly lit, every outfit impeccably styled, every vacation destination breathtaking. She sold a fantasy of effortless perfection. Her captions were a carefully crafted blend of faux vulnerability and brand promotion. She would post a photo of herself crying in a silk pajama set, linked in her bio of course, with a long caption about the importance of mental health, only to follow it up an hour later with the hyper-enthusiastic unboxing of a $1,000 handbag. She was the high priestess of the curated self, and her followers worshipped at her altar, lapping up every discount code and sponsored post. I knew of her, of course. It was impossible not to. Her face was on billboards, her name was attached to everything from protein powders to fast fashion. But she existed in a different universe, one I observed with a kind of detached anthropological curiosity. The day she walked into Ori, the little bell above the door chimed a discordant note, as if in warning. The afternoon sun was slanting through the front window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the scented air. I was at my organ, carefully measuring a drop of precious Champica Absolute into a beaker. The scent of Ita Complex blend of tea, apricot, and spice filled my workspace. Oh my God, this place is like so adorable. The voice sliced through the quiet air like a shard of glass. It was high-pitched, loud, and carried the unmistakable cadence of someone who was used to performing, even in an empty room. I looked up. There she was, Serafina Vance in the flesh. She was a whirlwind of motion and color. A neon pink trench coat, designer sunglasses perched on her perfectly coiffed blonde hair, and a phone already in her hand, panning around my studio for her Instagram story. "You guys, you will not believe this hidden gem I just found," she narrated to her phone, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. "It's like stepping back in time. It even smells magical." I felt a prickle of annoyance. My studio was not a hidden gem to be discovered and broadcast like a piece of gossip. It was a place of quiet work. I stood up, wiping my hands on my linen apron. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice was calm, but there was a coolness to it that I hoped she would register. She finally lowered her phone, her wide, blue eyes landing on me. Her smile was dazzling, a professional tool honed by years of practice. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi. Oh my God, are you the owner? I'm Sarah." She said it as if she were announcing the arrival of royalty. "I am Ilara," I replied, not offering my last name. "Welcome to Ori." "Ilara," she repeated, tasting the name. "That's so pretty. So ethereal. It fits this whole vibe." She gestured around the room. "I'm obsessed. Absolutely obsessed. My followers are going to die." She spent the next hour in my shop, a tornado of performative curiosity. She touched everything, smelled everything, took dozens of photos, and narrated her every thought to her phone. She didn't ask questions to learn. She asked questions that would make for good content. "So like this is real ambergris?" she asked, pointing to a small waxen lump under a glass cloche. She didn't wait for my detailed explanation of its origin as a treasure from the sea, a byproduct of sperm whales that ages for decades on the ocean waves. Instead, she turned to her phone. "You guys, it's actual whale stuff. So chic. So exclusive." I found myself correcting her constantly, gently at first. I explained the difference between an essential oil and an absolute. I tried to convey the years of study required to understand the chemistry and safety of these potent materials. She would nod, her eyes glazed over, before turning back to her phone to exclaim, "It's all like natural and organic, which I love." Despite my reservations, I was polite. She was, for all intents and purposes, a customer. Before she left, she bought one of my few ready-made scents, a simple but elegant blend of neroli and cedarwood I called Sunken Cathedral. "I'll tag you," she promised, air-kissing me on both cheeks before sweeping out of the shop, leaving a trail of her own generic, celebrity-endorsed perfume that clashed violently with the complex harmony of my studio. I sighed, walking over to the door and turning the sign to closed. The peace of the studio felt violated, as if a loud, garish television had been left on at full volume. I went back to my organ, trying to find my focus again, but the ghost of her presence lingered, a synthetic note I couldn't quite erase from the air. That night the tag came. My phone buzzed incessantly. Serafina had posted a multi-slide story and a grid post about her magical discovery. The photos were beautiful, of course. She had a professional eye for angles and light. She held the bottle of Sunken Cathedral up to the golden hour sun, her manicure perfect. She wrote a long gushing caption about supporting small female-owned businesses and the importance of authentic craftsmanship. My follower count, which had been static for years, began to climb. First by hundreds, then by thousands. My website traffic exploded. Emails flooded my inbox. People wanted to buy Sunken Cathedral. People wanted to book consultations. A part of me, the pragmatic business owner, was thrilled. This was exposure I could never have bought. But the other part of me, the quiet artisan, felt a deep sense of unease. The new followers weren't like my old ones. Their comments were full of emojis and slang. They didn't ask about the story of the scent. They asked, "Does Sarah really use this?" My craft was being reduced to a prop in her gilded life. Over the next few weeks, Sarah began to weave herself into the fabric of my life. She would text me at all hours. "Hey gorgeous. Thinking of you. Hope you're having a magical day." She would drop by the studio unannounced, always with her phone out, documenting our friendship. She insisted on taking me to lunch at trendy, Instagrammable restaurants where the food was secondary to the decor. During these lunches, I felt more like a subject under a microscope than a friend. Her questions were never about me, really. They were data mining operations. "So tell me everything about your process," she'd say, leaning forward with feigned intensity. "Like, what's the most expensive, rarest ingredient you use? Is it like from a super remote mountain or something?" "Well," I'd begin, trying to explain the complexity of sourcing oud from agarwood trees in Southeast Asia. The ethics involved, the different grades. "Oud," she'd interrupt, typing furiously into her phone's notes app. "OUD, got it. So exotic. Love it." She was gathering material, building a narrative. I was a character she was developing for her show. I felt a growing sense of being used, but I was caught in a trap of politeness and a strange, misplaced sense of gratitude. Her promotion had, undeniably, been good for business. I had a waitlist for consultations for the first time ever. I'd hired a part-time assistant to help with shipping. How could I be rude to the person who had made that possible? So I smiled. I answered her questions, and I tried to ignore the knot of anxiety that tightened in my stomach every time I saw her name on my phone screen. I tried to set boundaries subtly. When she asked to film my entire process of creating a bespoke scent for a client, I politely refused, citing client confidentiality. "Oh, of course, she'd said, her smile not wavering. But I saw it again, that flicker of something cold and hard in her eyes. A brief, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. It was the look of a predator whose prey was not behaving as expected. The tipping point, the moment the gilded facade cracked and revealed the rot beneath, came about 2 months after our first meeting. She summoned me to lunch at an exclusive rooftop restaurant. The view of the city was spectacular, but I felt a sense of vertigo, a premonition of a fall. She was already there, sipping a pink cocktail. She didn't hug me. She just gestured to the seat opposite her. "Alara, I have the most incredible idea," she began, her voice low and serious. The performance was over. This was business. "We are going to do a collaboration. A Sarah's Gilded Life X Ori perfume." My heart sank. I knew instinctively that this was not a collaboration. It was an acquisition. "Okay," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice neutral. "What did you have in mind?" "I've already got the concept," she said, pulling out a mood board on her iPad. It was a collage of pink clouds, diamond rings, and fashion models pouting on silk sheets. "We'll call it Gilded. The scent should be expensive. Like really sexy and expensive. Think Champagne and strawberries, but you know, chic. And we'll put like real gold flakes in it. My followers will go crazy for it. I stared at the mood board. It was the antithesis of everything I believed in. Champagne and strawberries were novelty notes, synthetic and simplistic. Gold flakes were a gimmick, a visual trick that had nothing to do with the art of perfumery. She was describing a body spray, not a fine fragrance. Sera. I began choosing my words carefully. My work is very personal. The scents are built around complex stories, natural essences. Yeah, the whole soulful artisan thing, I get it. She cut me off, waving a dismissive hand. And that's a great angle for the marketing. We'll play that up. But this is about scale, Alara. We'll mass produce it. I have a manufacturer I work with for my merch. We'll use your formulation as a base, they'll tweak it for mass production, and we'll sell it through my channels. We could move hundreds of thousands of units. My blood ran cold. Tweak it for mass production? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah, that's not how it works. The ingredients I use are rare. Some are seasonal. They can't be mass-produced. It would have to be entirely synthetic. It wouldn't be my work at all. Don't get bogged down in the details, she said, her voice taking on a sharp, impatient edge. It'll have your name on it. Well, our names. It will make you a millionaire. And then came the final insult. In terms of the split, she continued, looking at her nails, I'm thinking 80-20th. My platform is providing all the value, the marketing, the sales channel. You're just providing the initial idea. 80-20. I felt a dizzying wave of disbelief, followed by a slow rising tide of cold anger. She wanted to take my name, my art, my life's work, reduce it to a cheap synthetic parody, and then claim 80% of the profits for the privilege of doing so. She wasn't just using me. She was trying to consume me. I looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. Past the perfect makeup and the dazzling smile, I saw a black hole of need. A vacuum that had to be constantly filled with attention, validation, and money. My art was just the next thing she was going to feed into it. I took a deep breath, the air in the fancy restaurant feeling thin and sterile. No, I said. The word hung between us, small and hard and absolute. Her smile vanished. Her face became a blank mask. What did you say? I said no, Sarah. I repeated, my voice stronger now. I can't do that. It goes against every principle I have as a perfumer and as an artist. My work is not a gimmick. It's not a product to be tweaked and mass-marketed. I'm sorry, but I have to decline. For a long moment she just stared at me. The coldness in her eyes spread, icing over her entire expression. The Sarah's gilded life persona dissolved, and I was left looking at the raw, grasping ambition of Serafina Vance. You're making a huge mistake, she said, her voice flat and devoid of any warmth. I don't think I am, I replied quietly. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You will regret this, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. You have no idea who you're dealing with. And then she was gone, leaving me alone at the table with the spectacular view, and the sickening feeling that I had just lit a match in a room filled with gasoline. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was not the end. It was the beginning of a war I didn't know how to fight. The first tremor came 2 days later. It was subtle, almost deniable. Sarah posted a story to her Instagram. It was just a black screen with white text. It read, "So disappointed right now. You think you know someone and then they show you their true colors. It's a hard lesson to learn that not everyone who talks about authenticity is actually authentic." There was no name, no direct accusation. But I knew. It was a warning shot. A calibrated act of psychological warfare designed to make me anxious, to make me second-guess myself. My phone buzzed with a few messages from mutual acquaintances. Is everything okay with you and Sarah? I replied with vague assurances. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. It was the quiet before a storm, and I could smell the ozone in the air. I tried to ignore it. I threw myself into my work, seeking refuge in the familiar comfort of my studio. I was working on a complex fragrance for a cellist, trying to capture the scent of rosin, old wood, and the electric silence of a concert hall just before the first note is played. For hours at a time I could lose myself in the process, the outside world fading into an irrelevant hum. But the peace was fragile. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap into my throat. The storm broke a week later. It was a full-scale multi-platform assault. It began with the video. It was 20 minutes long, titled "The Truth About My Friendship with Ori Perfumes." Sarah was on camera, sitting in her pristine white living room. She was wearing a simple gray sweater, her makeup was minimal, and her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been crying for hours. It was a masterfully staged performance of a victim. "Hey guys," she began, her voice cracking. "This is probably the hardest video I've ever had to make." She then proceeded to weave a breathtaking tapestry of lies, each one meticulously designed to dismantle my reputation, my business, and my very identity. The first lie was about plagiarism. She claimed that the idea for Gilded, the champagne and strawberry scent, had been her creative concept, one she had shared with me in confidence during our friendship. "I was so excited about it," she said, a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. "I thought we could build something beautiful together." I trusted her. I told her all my ideas for the scent profile, the name, the marketing. And then, she tried to steal it. She told me she was going to launch it on her own without me. To prove this, she showed a page from her journal, where she had scrawled the word "Gilded" and doodled some pictures of champagne glasses. The date at the top of the page was clearly visible, dated a week before she had ever set foot in my shop. It was an obvious, clumsy forgery to anyone who knew anything about ink or paper, but to her millions of followers it was irrefutable proof. The second lie was far more insidious and damaging. It was an attack on the safety of my products. "After she betrayed me," Sarah continued, her voice trembling with manufactured pain, "I started thinking about the perfume I bought from her, Sunken Cathedral. I'd been feeling off. I had this weird rash on my wrists." She held up her wrists to the camera. There was a faint pinkness there, something that could have been caused by anything: a new laundry detergent, a nervous habit of scratching, or simply lighting and makeup. I went to a dermatologist and he said it was a severe allergic reaction, a form of chemical burn. He said the ingredients were questionable. She didn't offer a doctor's note. She didn't name the doctor. She just planted the seed of doubt. My perfumes, my carefully crafted creations made with the highest quality, lab-tested ingredients, were now positioned as dangerous, poisonous. The third and final lie was the masterstroke, an attack on my very soul. It was about my ethics. "The worst part, the part that truly breaks my heart," she said, choking back a sob, "is that I started looking into where she gets her ingredients. She talks a big game about sourcing and craftsmanship. You guys, it's a lie. I have it on good authority from an industry insider that some of her rare materials are unethically harvested, that she works with suppliers who are destroying fragile ecosystems and using exploitative labor. It's all a sham. She's built her authentic brand on a foundation of lies and suffering." She didn't name the industry insider. She offered no evidence beyond her own tearful, solemn word. But she didn't need to. The accusation was made. The poison was injected directly into the heart of everything I stood for. She ended the video by warning her followers. I feel like it's my duty to protect you guys. I brought this person, this brand into your lives, and I am so sorry. Please be careful. Don't support businesses that are built on deception and harm." The video went viral within hours. The title alone was pure clickbait. The algorithm, hungry for drama, pushed it to millions. And her followers, her loyal army, mobilized. The fallout was immediate and apocalyptic. It was a digital tsunami of hate. My phone began to melt down with notifications. Every post on my Instagram account, even ones from years ago, was flooded with thousands of comments. They called me a thief, a liar, a fraud, a monster. They used snake emojis, vomiting emojis, angry faces. "How dare you steal from Queen Sarah? Poison peddler. I hope you get sued into oblivion. You're disgusting, pretending to be all artisanal while you destroy the planet. Cancelory." The hate spilled out from Instagram. My business's Google and Yelp pages were carpet-bombed with one-star reviews. People who had never been to my city, let alone my shop, left detailed fictional accounts of getting rashes, of being treated rudely by me, of smelling a cheap chemical stench in my studio. My star rating, once a perfect 5, plummeted to a 1.5. The emails started next. A torrent of vitriol filling my inbox. Threats, curses, demands for refunds on products people had never purchased. I hope your business burns to the ground, you disgusting hack. Then the phone calls to the studio began. I had the number listed on my website for consultation bookings. My assistant, a sweet young art student named Chloe, was the one who answered first. I heard her voice tremble from my workspace. No, that's not true. Please don't use that language. She came to me, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. Alara, they're horrible. I took the next call myself. Ori Perfumes, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Are you the bitch who poisons people? A voice snarled on the other end. You should be in jail. I hung up, my hand trembling so badly I could barely place the receiver back in its cradle. The cancellations followed. Every single consultation on my waitlist, gone within 48 hours. People sent terse emails. Please remove me from your list. I no longer wish to be associated with your brand. Orders for Sunken Cathedral that were waiting to be shipped were canceled. The customers demanding immediate refunds through their credit card companies, citing fraudulent and unsafe products. My quiet, beautiful world, the one I had built with my own 2 hands with care and integrity, was being systematically dismantled brick by brick by a mob of strangers who had been whipped into a frenzy by a woman I had met only a handful of times. The betrayal was a physical sensation. It was a cold, heavy stone in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just Sarah's lies. It was the sheer speed and ferocity of the public's judgment. There was no trial, no presumption of innocence. In the court of social media, the verdict was instantaneous and brutal. I was guilty. Even people I knew were swept up in the tide. I saw comments from customers who had sat in my armchairs, who had cried as they told me their stories. They weren't hateful, but they were full of confusion and doubt. Alara, I'm so disappointed to hear this. I thought you were different. Each one of those was a small, sharp knife in my heart. After 3 days of this unrelenting siege, I couldn't take it anymore. I told Chloe to take the rest of the week off with pay. I couldn't subject her to the abuse. I logged out of all my social media accounts. I silenced my phone. I locked the door to my studio, the little bell chiming a mournful, final-sounding note. I went home to my small apartment above the shop. The air was still, thick with the ghosts of perfumes on my clothes, on my skin. But for the first time in my life, I found the scent suffocating. The bergamot smelled like accusation. The rose smelled like betrayal. The vetiver smelled like defeat. I drew the curtains, plunging my world into a dim twilight. The digital world had destroyed my real one, and so I unplugged from it completely. I didn't read the news. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't answer the door. I existed in a state of suspended animation, a ghost in my own home. The days bled into one another, a gray, featureless smear of time. I didn't work. How could I? The joy was gone. The passion had been extinguished, drowned in a sea of anonymous hatred. My organ, my beautiful palette of scents, sat silent and gathering dust in the studio below. The thought of touching the bottles, of creating anything, filled me with a profound and weary sadness. It felt like trying to write poetry after someone had burned down your library. What was the point? My creations were no longer seen as art. They were evidence of my supposed crimes. My sleep was a battlefield of anxiety dreams. I would be standing in my studio, and the walls would start weeping a black, viscous liquid. The perfume bottles would shatter one by one. I would wake up with my heart pounding, the phantom smell of scorched roses in my nostrils. During the day I would just sit. I would sit in my armchair and stare at the wall, the silence of my apartment roaring in my ears. The stone of betrayal in my stomach had grown, hardening into a dense, cold lump of despair. It was a physical weight. It made it hard to breathe, hard to eat. I lost weight. My world, once so rich with sensory detail, had shrunk to the 4 walls of my room and the vast barren landscape of my own grief. Who was I, if not a perfumer? For so long, my identity had been inextricably linked to my craft. Alara, the woman who listens. Alara, the woman who creates. Alara, the keeper of scents and stories. Now that identity had been stolen and replaced with a grotesque caricature. Alara, the thief, the liar, the poisoner. And the world believed the caricature. I felt a profound sense of shame, as irrational as it was. I was the victim, but I felt sullied, exposed, humiliated. I would walk to the corner market in the dead of night, my head down, a scarf wrapped around my face, terrified that someone would recognize me from the photos Sarah had posted of us in our happy days. Every whisper I overheard felt like it was about me. Every person who glanced at me on the street seemed to be judging me. The isolation was absolute. I had a few close friends, but I didn't know how to talk to them about what had happened. How do you explain the feeling of being buried alive by a million tiny digital shovels? How do you articulate a pain that is so vast and so public, yet so deeply personal? They had seen the video. I imagined their confusion, their divided loyalties. There's no smoke without fire, people say. Sarah had created a bonfire. So I retreated, I shut them out, believing it was better to be alone than to face their pity or worse, their doubt. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The studio remained closed. A layer of dust settled on everything, a gray shroud over my dormant life. My savings began to dwindle. The rent on the studio space was still due. The utilities. Reality was beginning to knock, but I had no energy to answer the door. The despair was a physical paralysis. It told me there was no point. The world had made its decision. Serafina Vance had won. She had taken my life's work, my reputation, my joy, and she had snuffed them out as easily as pinching a candle flame. Rock bottom is not a dramatic, sudden impact. It is a slow, quiet settling into the mud. It is the moment you stop struggling. It is the acceptance of the dark. I was there. I was sitting in the dim light of my apartment, staring at an eviction notice that had been slipped under my door, and I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty stillness. I had nothing left to lose because I had already lost myself. And in that absolute hollowed-out emptiness, the tiniest, most unexpected thing happened. Flicker. It wasn't a grand epiphany. It was a scent. The city had just been washed clean by a sudden violent thunderstorm. I had opened the window a crack, not for fresh air, but simply because the silence in my apartment had become too loud to bear. The sound of the rain had been a temporary comfort. As the storm passed and the evening sun broke through the clouds, a specific unmistakable fragrance drifted up from the street below. Petrichor. The scent of rain on dry, warm earth and asphalt. It's a complex smell, a mixture of plant oils, ozone, and a compound called geosmin. To me, it had always smelled like renewal, like the world taking a deep, clean breath after being cleansed. I had spent years trying to capture its essence, its elusive, earthy promise. I had a small vial in my studio, a trial formulation I'd labeled After the Rain, made with vetiver, patchouli, clary sage, and a dozen other secret touches. And as that scent filled my room, it bypassed the despair. It bypassed the shame and the fear. It went straight to a part of me I thought was dead. The perfumer. The artist. It didn't trigger the pain of the last few months. It triggered the memory of the joy that had come before. I remembered the thrill of the chase, the intellectual and creative challenge of deconstructing a scent and rebuilding it from its elements. For the first time in months, I felt something other than a dull ache. It was a flicker of anger. But it wasn't the hot, reactive anger of the initial attack. It was a cold, quiet, deep anger. A protector's anger. Sarah had not just lied about me. She had taken my story and twisted it into something ugly. She had narrated my life, my art, and cast me as the villain. And I had let her. I had retreated, I had hidden, I had allowed her narrative to become the only one in existence. I had been silent. My silence had been mistaken for guilt. The eviction notice on my table was no longer a symbol of my defeat. It was a catalyst. The scent of petrichor was no longer just a smell. It was a sign. Renewal. I stood up from the armchair, my joints stiff from weeks of inactivity. I walked over to my desk and looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. I saw a stranger. A pale, thin woman with haunted eyes and dull hair. But behind the haunted eyes, for the first time, there was a spark. My story had been stolen. It was time to steal it back. The anger was the fuel, but it was not the map. I knew with absolute clarity that I could not fight Sarah on her terms. I couldn't engage in a shouting match. I couldn't post a tearful reactive video. To do so would be to play her game, a game she had mastered, and I would surely lose. She thrived on drama, on spectacle, on emotion. My response had to be the antithesis of all that. My strength had never been in volume, it had been in substance. My craft was one of meticulous detail, of undeniable facts, of patience. My revenge, I decided, would be built from the same materials. It would not be a bonfire. It would be a diamond, something so hard, so clear, and so precisely cut that it could not be scratched or denied. It would be the truth, presented with the same care and precision with which I would formulate a perfume. The idea began to take shape, not as a cry for help, but as a statement of fact. A ledger. I had my ledgers in the studio, the leather-bound books filled with my life's work. They were my proof, my history, my truth. And I realized my response had to be a kind of public ledger. The plan formed slowly over several days. I started to eat again, simple things at first. I started to sleep, not well, but without the nightmares. With each passing day, the paralysis receded, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was a craftsman preparing for my most important work. First, I had to re-enter the world I had fled. I logged back online. I didn't look at my old accounts. The thought was still too painful. Instead, I created new, anonymous accounts. I became a ghost, a silent observer. I spent days watching. I watched Sarah's video again, this time not as a victim, but as a strategist. I took notes, dissecting every lie, every performance, every manipulative trick. I saw the cheap forgery of her journal, the vague medical claims, the unsubstantiated insider sources. It was a house of cards. But it was a house that had stood for months because no one had blown on it. Then I started to research. I learned about the world of YouTube commentary channels, about digital forensics, about how to present evidence in a way that was compelling and easily understood by a lay audience. I learned that the internet, while a powerful tool for lies, could also be a powerful tool for meticulously documented truth. The centerpiece of my plan would be a video, not a short, emotional clip, but a long-form documentary-style presentation. It would be calm, quiet, and devastatingly thorough. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't cry. I would simply present the evidence, piece by piece, and let the audience draw their own conclusions. The channel name came to me in a flash of inspiration. It had to be bold, a declaration of intent. Her revenge arc. It was not just my story. It was a story many women could relate to, the story of being silenced and finally finding the strength to speak. My battlefield would be my studio, the place where my reputation had been born, and where it had been murdered. It was time to resurrect it. I went downstairs, the key feeling heavy in my hand. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was stale, the silence oppressive. The layer of dust on my organ, on the glass vials, on the velvet armchairs, was like a physical manifestation of my neglect. I spent the next week not planning the video but cleaning. It was a ritual. I wiped down every shelf, polished every bottle, swept the floors, and cleaned the windows until the light streamed in, bright and clear. I organized my ledgers, my receipts, my certificates of analysis for every ingredient I had ever purchased. I found the emails, the original collaboration proposal from Sarah, and my polite, firm refusal. I printed everything. I created a file for each of her lies, and in each file I placed the irrefutable proof that dismantled it. As I cleaned and organized my physical space, I felt my mind clearing as well. The fog of despair was lifting, burned away by the clean, bright light of purpose. Finally, the studio was ready. It was clean, calm, and ready to bear witness. I bought a simple, high-quality camera and a good microphone. I didn't want fancy production values. The content had to be the star. I set up the camera on a tripod, positioning it so that it faced my workbench. The background was not a curated white living room, but my studio, my shelves of ingredients, my tools, my truth. The day I filmed, I dressed simply, in my usual linen work apron. I tied my hair back.
Ibura no makeup.
I sat at my workbench, my files laid out before me, my ledgers stacked neatly to one side. For a long moment, I just looked into the camera lens, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm. I was terrified, but the fear was different now. It was the fear of a performer stepping onto a stage, not the fear of a victim hiding in the dark. I took a deep breath, the familiar, complex scent of my studio filling my lungs like courage. And then I pressed record. "Hello," I began, my voice quiet but clear, amplified by the small microphone clipped to my apron. "My name is Alara. I am the owner and perfumer of Ori. For the past few months, my business, my reputation, and my life's work have been the subject of a story told by someone else. A story that is not true. Today I would like to tell you my side. I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm going to ask you to look at the evidence. This may take some time, so I appreciate your patience." My tone was that of a professor beginning a lecture. Calm, factual, unemotional. I started with the first lie, plagiarism. "I have been accused of stealing a creative concept for a perfume called Gilded," I said, looking directly into the lens. "This concept was allegedly shared with me in confidence by Serafina Vance. This is the journal entry she presented as evidence." I put a high-resolution scan of her forged journal entry on the screen. Then I began my methodical deconstruction. I am a perfumer, but my hobby is calligraphy and the study of inks and paper. Let's look closely at this entry. I zoomed in on the date. This date is written with a gel pen, a popular brand known for its quick-drying vivid ink. The rest of the page, however, is written with a ballpoint pen with a much finer tip. If you look at the impression on the back of the page, which I will show you now, you can see the deep grooves of the ballpoint, but almost no impression from the gel pen used for the date, which suggests the date was added later, with a much lighter hand. I continued, my voice even. Furthermore, the concept of a champagne and strawberry scent is not a unique creative idea. It is a common trope in mass-market fragrances. To illustrate, here is a list of 27 different perfumes and body sprays, launched over the last 15 years, that have used this exact scent profile. A list scrolled down the screen. "But most importantly," I said, my voice unwavering, "the core of my work is documented, meticulously, for a decade. These are my formulation ledgers." I opened one of the heavy leather-bound books. I turned it to the camera, the pages filled with my neat script with dates, with formulas, with notes and observations. Every scent I have ever worked on is in these books. Dated, trialed, documented. The idea for Gilded does not appear anywhere in my work because it is not my work. It is not my style. It is not my art. I moved to the next lie, the most dangerous one, the safety of my products. "I was accused of selling unsafe products that caused a chemical burn," I said. "This is a very serious accusation. The health and safety of my clients is, and has always been, my absolute highest priority." I did not attack her claim directly. Instead, I built a fortress of facts around it. "Every single ingredient I use," I explained, "comes with a certificate of analysis from the supplier. This document shows the chemical breakdown of the batch and confirms its purity. Here is the certificate for the Neroli oil used in the batch of Sunken Cathedral that Ms. Vance purchased." I held the document up to the camera, then showed a clear scan of it, highlighting the batch numbers. Every ingredient also comes with a material safety data sheet, which outlines all potential hazards and safe handling procedures. I am trained and certified in cosmetic safety and regulations. I then showed a short video clip of my sanitation process. Me in gloves and a mask, sterilizing my glass speakers and equipment in an autoclave. My studio is a laboratory, and I adhere to strict laboratory protocols. Furthermore, every final formulation undergoes stability and dermatological testing before it is ever offered to a client. I keep a sample from every single batch I create. This is the sample from the batch of Sunken Cathedral that Ms. Vance purchased. I held up a small labeled vial. It is perfectly stable. It is perfectly safe. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. I cannot speak to what may or may not have appeared on Ms. Vance's skin. I am not a doctor. However, I can state with 100% certainty backed by documentation and scientific evidence, that my products are safe, stable, and created to the highest professional standards. Finally, I addressed the third lie, the one that had hurt the most, the accusation of unethical sourcing. This was the claim that cut the deepest. I admitted, my voice softening for the first time with a flicker of real raw emotion. My craft is built on a profound respect for nature, for the people who cultivate and harvest these precious materials. The idea that I would be complicit in its destruction is abhorrent to me. I didn't just deny it. I told stories. Let's talk about my sandalwood, I began. I showed a picture of a smiling man in a field in Western Australia. This is David. He runs a sustainable sandalwood plantation. His family has been doing this for 3 generations. They don't harvest wild trees. They cultivate them, ensuring the survival of the species. I have visited his farm. Here is a photo of me with him. Here are my import documents and receipts for the ethically harvested sandalwood oil I purchased from him. I did this for ingredient after ingredient. I showed photos of the women's cooperative in Morocco from which I sourced my argan oil. I showed my correspondence with a small family-owned distillery in Bulgaria that produced my Rose Otto. I put faces and names and stories to my supply chain. I turned her vague, malicious accusation into an opportunity to showcase the very thing she had tried to destroy, my integrity. I had built my case brick by brick. A fortress of truth. Now it was time for the final killing blow. The motive. So the question is, why? I asked, my voice returning to its calm, factual tone. Why would Serafina Vance fabricate such elaborate and damaging lies? The public was led to believe it was because I stole her idea. The truth, I'm afraid, is much simpler and much more cynical. I put a scan of her original collaboration proposal on the screen. I highlighted the 80-20 split. I highlighted the part about using a third-party manufacturer to tweak my formula. This was the collaboration I was offered, I said. An offer to license my name and my story for a mass-produced, synthetic product over which I would have no creative or quality control, in exchange for 20% of the profit. Then I put a scan of my reply on the screen. It was the polite, professional email in which I had declined her offer, explaining that it was incompatible with my artistic principles. And this was my response, I said. I declined her offer. The date on my email is 2 days before her first cryptic social media post about disappointment and inauthenticity. Her video, filled with these accusations, was posted exactly 1 week after I refused to sign my name and my work over to her. I didn't connect the dots for them. I didn't have to. The timeline was laid out cold and clear. I had presented the crime, the evidence, the cover-up, and now the motive. I leaned back slightly from the workbench. I have presented you with my ledgers, my certificates, my receipts, my correspondence, and my principles. Her story was based on emotion and accusation. My story is based on documentation and fact. I will leave it to you, the viewer, to decide which story you believe. I ended the video by looking directly into the camera one last time. I had to close my studio. I faced an avalanche of hatred and threats, all based on a lie. I don't know if I will be able to reopen, but I could not, in good conscience, allow my life's work to be defined by that lie. Thank you for listening. I reached forward and pressed the button, stopping the recording. The silence in the studio rushed back in. The video was 1 hour and 17 minutes long. I spent the rest of the day editing it, not for content, but to insert the high-resolution scans and images where they belonged. I didn't add music. I didn't add fancy transitions. It was stark, clean, and unadorned. That evening, with a hand that was surprisingly steady, I created my YouTube channel, Her Revenge Arc. I wrote a simple description. A space for stories that need to be told. A place for the truth. I uploaded the video. I titled it, A Perfumer's Ledger. My response to Serafina Vance. And then I let it go. I closed my laptop. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat in my armchair, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I had done what I could. I had spoken my truth. The rest was out of my hands. For the first 12 hours there was almost complete silence. The video had only a few hundred views, likely from people who stumbled upon it by chance. The comments were few, mostly from bots or random passersby. A knot of doubt began to tighten in my stomach. What if no one cared? What if the truth was simply too quiet, too detailed, too boring? What if Sarah's lie, so shiny and dramatic, was simply a better story? And then it started. It began with a single comment that was different from the others. It was long and thoughtful. "I am a lawyer," it read. "I am not a fan of either party. I watched this out of curiosity. The level of documentation here is extraordinary. This is not a defense. It is a prosecution. I am convinced." That comment was liked hundreds of times. Then, a small commentary channel, one known for its detailed analysis of internet drama, picked up the video. The host, a man with a reputation for being cynical and fair, did a live stream where he watched my entire video, pausing it to comment. "Wow," he said 20 minutes in. "She's not just making claims, she's showing receipts." Literally. By the end of his stream, he was unequivocal. Sarah's gilded life has some serious explaining to do. This is one of the most thorough, methodical takedowns I have ever seen on this platform. His stream sent a wave of thousands of viewers to my video. The view count began to climb exponentially, from thousands to tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. The comment section exploded, but this time it was a different kind of explosion. It was an explosion of support, of outrage on my behalf, of admiration for the methodical way I had presented my case. The way she never raised her voice. One comment read, "Absolute class. This is a masterclass in how to handle a smear campaign. No tears, no drama. Just cold, hard facts." I was one of the people who believed Sarah. I feel sick to my stomach now.
I am so sorry.
The hashtag SarahLied began to trend on Twitter. People started going back to Sarah's original video, flooding her comments with questions, demanding she respond to the evidence I had presented. "Show us the doctor's note, Sarah. Explain the 80/20th split. Let's see the rest of your journal, not just one page." Sarah's response when it came was a disaster. She went live on Instagram, her face puffy and blotchy. The professional lighting was gone. The curated background was replaced by a messy bedroom. She was clearly rattled. She didn't address a single piece of my evidence. Instead, she doubled down on emotion. "I can't believe she would twist things like this," she cried, her voice shrill. "She's attacking me, a victim. She's a bully using all these complicated documents to confuse you all. The truth is in my heart, and my truth is that she betrayed me. It was the wrong move." Her audience, once so loyal, had been armed with facts. Her emotional appeals now looked like what they were: manipulation. The tide of public opinion, which had once been a tsunami that crashed down upon me, now turned and rushed back towards her with devastating force. Her sponsors began to pull out, issuing public statements that they were reevaluating their partnership. Her follower count, for the first time in her career, began to drop. Meanwhile, my subscriber count on her revenge arc was skyrocketing. 100,000, 500,000, a million. People weren't just subscribing for the drama. They were subscribing to what I represented. Quiet strength, integrity, and the power of truth. My video was shared in university business ethics classes, in law forums, in PR circles. It became a case study. The most profound shift, however, happened in my email inbox. It was no longer filled with hate. It was filled with stories. People, mostly women, wrote to me from all over the world. They told me about being smeared by an ex-partner, about being bullied at work, about having their ideas stolen by a male colleague. They saw their own struggles in my story. "Thank you for showing me that you don't have to scream to be heard." One woman wrote, "You've inspired me to speak my own truth." I had set out to reclaim my own narrative, and in doing so, I had inadvertently created a space for others to feel seen in theirs. A month after I posted the video, my subscriber count on her revenge arc surpassed Serafina Vance's. The news was reported in online magazines. Niche artisan dethrones influencer queen with hour-long YouTube video. But the numbers, as satisfying as they were not the real victory. The real victory was the feeling that bloomed in my chest, a feeling I hadn't felt in a very long time: joy. The joy of my craft. I began receiving emails from potential clients again. But these were different. They weren't chasing a trend. They wrote long, thoughtful letters about why my story had resonated with them, about their own appreciation for authenticity and quiet craftsmanship. I reopened Ori. There was no grand announcement. I simply turned the sign on the door from closed to open, and a waitlist, longer and more heartfelt than any I had ever had before, began to grow. My life returned, but it was not the same life as before. It was richer, more purposeful. I had found a voice I never knew I had, and a community I never knew I needed. I continued to post videos on her revenge arc, not about drama, but about my craft. I did long, quiet videos explaining the history of frankincense, showing the delicate process of enfleurage, talking about the relationship between scent and memory. People loved them. They loved the slowness, the detail, the passion. I had found my audience, or rather, they had found me. As for Serafina, her gilded cage crumbled. Her sponsors abandoned her. Her followers dwindled, and her brand, built on a foundation of performative authenticity, was exposed as hollow. She eventually deleted her accounts and vanished from the internet. Another ghost in the machine she had tried to manipulate. I never heard from her again. I felt no triumph in her fall, only a quiet, weary sense of justice. She had not been destroyed by me. She had been destroyed by the truth. My world is quiet again now. The air in my studio is once again filled with the scents of vetiver and rose, of earth and memory. But it is a different kind of quiet. It is not the quiet of silence, but the quiet of confidence. The quiet of knowing who you are, what you stand for, and having the courage to speak it, even if your voice shakes. The most powerful revenge, I have learned, is not to destroy your enemy, but to build a life so beautiful and so true that their existence becomes utterly irrelevant. The stories we tell about ourselves are the most powerful spells we can cast. For a long time I allowed someone else to tell my story, to cast a dark spell upon my life. Reclaiming that narrative was the hardest thing I have ever done. It forced me to face my own despair, and to find a strength I didn't know I possessed. It taught me that while a lie can travel around the world in an instant, the truth, when it finally puts on its shoes, can walk 1,000 miles and never tire. And so, I want to ask you, the listener, have you ever had a moment where your story was taken from you, twisted or silenced? What did it take for you to find your voice again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters. And if this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribing to her revenge arc for more stories of truth, resilience, and reclamation. Thank you for listening.